Um, Welcome back for those of you who are here before, and welcome for those of you who have just joined us. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who's Rachel O'Connell. I think I mentioned in the EU consent presentation, we've kind of ducked parental consent so far. We put it in the too difficult piece, but Rachel doesn't find it too difficult. But Rachel boasts 25 years experience in the online safety. You'd never tell from looking at you, would you? And is a leading expert in online child safety. She set up the UK's first Internet Safety Centre back in 2000 and was the author of the PAS 1296, which was the original, and some might say the best, standard for age verification that we effectively built the industry on. And in 2017, she founded Trust Elevate, which is a child age and parental responsibility verification provider. So look forward to hearing what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk today about addressing that, creating a standard for how we verify parental responsibility for a child. So those of you with a legal leaning will understand that under GDPR, there's a requirement to obtain parental consent from the authorized holder of parental responsibility for a child when you're going to process their data. In the US, under COPPA, the reason why all of social media companies are 13 plus is a requirement to obtain parental consent if the child is below 13, right? So the reason I chose to see this woman, the mom and son who are paintballing, right? Because I want us to put us into the mindset of what we do every single day as parents, or quite often as parents, right? Health and safety regulations, when you're going to take your kid paintballing or swimming or to sports, right? You sign a consent form, right? Because children are more vulnerable, and so you as the responsible adults, you have to sign and you understand the safety standards. We need to get consent that informs the parents of the risks, right? And so you make an informed decision about whether you want your child to participate or not. And consent builds a sense of shared responsibility between you and the swimming pool or the paintballing venue, whatever it is. There's clear expectations. And if, for example, you go to a swimming pool and the floor is slippy and it doesn't seem chlorinated, you can complain because that's your right as a parent. You're protecting your child. Obtaining consent protects organizations also. It's a two-way street from legal liability. So if you sign up, here's like a child swimming lesson parental consent form, right? In there are your details, your child's date of birth, any allergies they may have, their level of swimming, are they beginners? Because they need to know that, right? If the kid's going to go in the shallow end or the deep end. And then you understand the risks, drowning, they may have allergies to the chemicals in the pool, and you, as the authorized holder of parental responsibility for that child, you sign a consent form. That's kind of your consent receipt also. So if they sign up to ballet, when you register with a new GP, you have to sign a consent form. We get your passport, you open a bank account. If your kids are going to a city school, they might often go to a city farm. The Science Museum, there are a whole plethora of situations in the real world where we as parents sign consent. And we agree, there's a tacit agreement between us and those organizations about roles and responsibilities, right? So we need something similar in the online world, because when kids are on social media platforms, streaming and gaming, they're digital playgrounds, right? There are equivalent roles and responsibilities. So how do we enable parents to exercise that right to give consent and revoke consent? And how do we enable them to have a record of that consent? How do we give them a consent receipt? And we're seeing with regulations like the DSA, we're moving towards parents and end users having the right to redress, right? And dispute resolution. So for that mechanism to operate, you need a way to, as companies, to know this is actually a verified authorized holder of parental responsibility for a child. So I was going to put all of the regulations, but it was like, oh my goodness. So at a global level, there are regulations that enact what is written in the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which is a duty of care that companies have towards children and young people, but also towards their parents, right? The Five Rights Foundation has been absolutely excellent in articulating that those rights that we expect offline for children also transpose into the online world. And we have the growth of the global network of online safety regulators. And what we're seeing is cross-regulatory activity right? So the competition markets, the antitrust regulators are communicating with the data protection regulators, who are communicating with the Audiovisual Media Services Directive regulators and data protection regulators around the globe. So you're seeing multi-pronged investigations into companies with respect to whether or not they're complying with regulations. That creates a huge situation whereby non-compliance is no longer a cost of doing business. Non-compliance means something very, very serious. And so we have companies engaging in terms of understanding how they can leverage these technologies, how they can leverage the new standards to meet those requirements. So I'm really proud. Our partners here, Privo, are here, Claire is here. We've been working with Privo. I've been in this space for about 26 years. And so Privo in terms of consent and safe harbor. So we've combined our forces and intellectual knowledge, and we're working with the IEEE to develop a standard about verifiable parental consent so that you understand the levels of assurance associated with the different methods, which I'll describe in a moment. I'm really delighted and excited also to be working with the Kantara initiative. They've developed a consent receipt specification standard, which is now transposed into an ISO standard. So what we're going to do is kind of almost like a magpie, take the expertise from different areas, put these together, invite industry to come along, and then the ISO standards, you've got companies like Google, Microsoft, and others who are also participating in this, and crucially having the regulators involved in this, because this is a fast-paced environment in terms of these changes. So having regulators contribute and participate in these processes and look and consider where in the tech stack the verifiable parental consent should happen. Where is the optimal locations, and what are the technologies and what are the implications? So we created the VPC Trust Alliance, Verified Parental Consent, and we're also thinking about vulnerable person care. So you may have adults that need special protections also. So we launched this standard at the Privo Child Digital Privacy Conference in LA. Was that last month, Claire? January. It does. It does. And in the intervening period, we've been bringing together a lot of stakeholders, right? Because people often think that there are impediments to verifiable parental consent. So let's work through some of those. So what we're trying to achieve is informed and explicit parental consent as per the requirements in law, right? And that links very closely with age assurance, because if you age assure, you verify, or you age estimate this as a 4-year-old can't read a privacy policy. A 4-year-old can't consent to what's happening. So you need to enable that parent to take, or legal guardian to take action. There are a plethora of fundamental rights here. I will share this deck if anybody wants it afterwards. I'm trying to put together the fundamental rights for children is to access, participate, learn, right? And as a parent, you have the right to protect your child and make sure that those who are acting in loco parentis, like a digital playground, are actually exercising the duty of care towards your child. There are multiple risks and harms for kids, as those of us in the internet safety world are very familiar with: pro-anorexia, pro-bulimia, pro-suicide content that children are exposed to. How do you limit that? And then the growing raft of regulations, and also the changing business models. We've had the attention economy, now we've got the intimacy economy, where we've chatbots talking to kids. So there are implications of balancing the fundamental rights with those obligations and mitigating and minimizing the risks of harm, where you optimize a positive experience for kids. This is not restrictive, it's about participation and access to the kind of pleasant environments that they should be in. So we've got some definitions that we've been working through, and we're relying very heavily on pre-existing definitions that are in the ISO standards, and linking that with the Age Assurance 27566, and looking at how do we make sure that we include the technologies, all of the technologies that meet a specific kind of standard. So there are solutions out there and methods that connect an adult and a child, and it's an indicator, right? There's an indication. So the child puts in their parents, the child puts in a date of birth. It indicates that they're under 13. They're asked for a parent's email address, right? That's the original COPPA plus. And if that's an automated email, and if somebody clicks on that, it's presumed it's a parent. That's actually an adult-child connection indicator. There's no verification that that's the actual parent of the child, right? So that would be a low assurance in identity standards kind of thing. If you verify parental responsibility for a child, so if you gather the child's first name, last name, date of birth, and parent's mobile number, and verify against authoritative data sources, that's what Trust Elevate does, for example, you can then verify that that is the parent of the child. That's a different level of assurance, right? And you can do that using privacy-enhanced pets, privacy-enhancing technologies, and even zero-knowledge approaches, right? So, and you can enable ongoing verification. So from the consent, I also mentioned the consent receipt part of this. So you need a parental dashboard where the parent can say, oh, on the 12th of April, at 11:02, I gave consent to this company to process this data. So this this company now knows that my child is below 12 years of age. So if that child comes along and says, Mom, look what I found on my feed. You then as a parent have the right as a digital parent to bring that potentially to the attention of a regulator, right? So you have the power, so you can be open to redress, the benefits of redress, right? So it's a shift in the balance of power. It's really, really important to think about it that way. You're enabling that digital parent to protect their child's rights and to have the benefits afforded to them in law to kind of question whether or not these companies are exercising the appropriate duty of care towards your child and everybody else's child. So there are various methods. This is not an exhaustive list. I mentioned the email verification COPPA+. There's age estimation, which can be applied to estimate the age of the child, or there was a recent submission to the FTC to see if that could be used to estimate the age of a parent and kind of suggest a parent-child connection. That was rejected at the moment. There's ID verification. You can say, oh, okay, so you say you're the parent of the child. You can scan your ID document, and that gives, there's traceability and linkability then back to an individual. That could be combined with an age estimation of a child's face. Does that meet the requirements? That's for regulators and companies to decide. You could do a video conference that's probably not scalable, or you could do verified parental responsibility where you verify against authoritative data sources. So there's a scale there. There are different levels of assurance, and the requirements will differ depending on the context, right? Remember at the first slide, whether you're opening a bank account, in that instance, you're the verified authorized holder of parental responsibilities entering into a contract with the bank on behalf of the child. So it's a high level of assurance required under the Anti-Money Laundering Directive. Different laws have different levels of assurance that are required. So just in a visual, adult-child connection indicator, you don't really know if it's the parent, but it's kind of maybe an indicator, versus VPR, verified parental responsibility. And there's a scale in between. And that's the purpose of the standard, is to articulate those levels. Now, what are the challenges? We very often hear people say, oh, you can't do that because there are children in care, there's refugees, there's kids in foster care, so they might be excluded. Now, these are the wicked problems. They seem so complex and difficult to sort out. But you look at regulations around the world. In the US in 2014, they introduced a piece of legislation called Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act, because they realized that the majority of kids who are being sex trafficked are in vulnerable situations such as refugee or foster care. And when they did a huge analysis of why that happens, it's very often because if a child is in a situation where there's biological kids and foster kids, if there's any difference in treatment between the kids, that can make one feel very isolated, right? So this strengthening of Families Act says basically, if you're the foster carer, there's a normalcy. Create some normalcy for the kids. Make them feel like they're part of the family, so you act in loco parentis and you can take decisions on behalf of the child. There's an equivalent in the UK legislation called delegated authority. It's a bit more complex in the UK. The original biological parent can retain parental responsibility, but the foster carer has the delegated authority. And as part of a UK programme of work with the UK government around the verification of children online, we worked with the social workers, the British Association of Social Workers, to say, how does this work in practice? right? And there's a form that you as a parent sign that details, you have the authority to take them to the dentist, the doctor, and manage their online activities, right? It exists already. So what we're going to do in this standard, and what we have done, is bring those really important stakeholders into this process of developing the standard. Now, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, they don't give out IDs to refugees, but they manage that at a country level. So we're working with the European Asylum Seekers Centre that's actually based in Malta to look at the process how quickly do these kids get residence cards? Can those be included in the scanning? What does that look like? So we've just basically grabbed the complex problems and said, right, let's iron these out. Let's not have a situation where people make assumptions that it's too difficult to do. Let's just unpack that. The other thing is that people think, oh, what about kids who are in the LGBTQI community or have mental health issues and want to seek help and advice and don't want their parents to know about it, right? So what we're doing is working with the Harvard Children's Medical Center and the Boston Digital Wellness Center to put together the Inspired Internet Pledge, which is working with TikTok, Pinterest, and other companies to say, how do we enable access to high quality mental health and sexual health information on those platforms anonymously, right? Let's make high quality content available. So there's a huge piece of work. Those are stakeholders in this standard making, right? And then we're ultimately trying to get to a situation where verified parental consent done correctly ensures that parents and legal guardians are providing the permissions and they can look after their kids' rights. I mean, how many of us here as parents, sometimes you're annoyed about something, the way something is handled, and you're like, you know what, I'm not happy with that, right? I want this done correctly. Or you negotiate with your child how to play, for example, on a playground. One of them might throw sand and the other one's not, and you're negotiating with them how to navigate childhood in a real world environment, and similarly they may need some help and support in the online world. So we're going through the functional and non-functional requirements. Obviously we need usability, accessibility, transparency, accountability. There's been a whole load of work done by the Internet Commission about accountability and abuse management systems. When you have an abuse management system, you've got a record of whether or not the safety features are working and to what degree. That is an untapped intelligence resource at the moment. You could create a reciprocal feedback loop from that to your verification processes. So that's also something that we're looking at. Zero knowledge proof. Here's like an ASCII kind of diagram of zero knowledge proof. It's really important for people to realize that you can verify parental responsibility for a child in a zero knowledge way. Right? So all that the relying party gets is, yes, this is a verified parent of a child that is below 12 years of age. Create the experience for them. Alter the parameters of your AI such that they're not surfacing negative content. Alter the parameters of your AI such that they're not connecting these kids to adult strangers. That's kind of how you create, that's the online safety piece of the standard. So the benefits, you're enabling a compliant, rights-respecting platforms to enhance child safety, and it's inclusive, and it should lead to a reduction in online child. My PhD is analysing paedophile activity on the internet and looking at the implications for investigative strategy. So I'm driven by that. How do we leverage technology intelligently to protect those children and young people so they're not exposed to that? And then there's the reduction in illegal and harmful content, and also enabling digital parenting. Very often parents are like, oh my God, I want my kids to use the devices. They need to be online because they need to get good grades in their homework and they want to have a future and a career. I know there's bad stuff on there, but I don't know what to do about it, right? So they feel disempowered. This way, it's kind of empowering them back into the discussion with platforms about how to create safer digital platforms. So my final point is to extend an invitation to anybody who's very interested in participating in this standards building process. It will be fairly rapid because a lot of the work has been done already. We're piecing together different pieces of standards that are relevant and inviting those stakeholders to say, okay, what does that mean in terms of codes of practice in the fostering organizations, et cetera, and the refugee. So we're bringing the key stakeholders. So yeah, thank you so much. So any questions? I'd love to hear any questions.
Thanks, Rachel. In terms of standards, have you given any thought to sort of which standards bodies you might want to work with and how you take that forward?
Yes, IEEE, we're working with the IEEE Association, and also because I've been in the standards space for a while, Andrew Hughes, who's the chair of Kantara, is going to be involved, and there are other standards bodies. So we're taking bits and pieces from different standards bodies, and we've got the buy-in from those standards bodies to work together collaboratively, because this is quite an important issue, right? When we think about enhancing safety of kids online. Great question.
Hi, thank you. I completely resonate with what you explained, because that's what exactly we do in India. And to talk about that, I just wanted to understand that, because we hear a lot of the problematic areas when it is about a shared device, children using the same device as parents do. What about the consent over there? Because children are smart enough to give consent from the parents' device to themselves, and where do we draw the line over there? And also, because you spoke about children of different categories of LGBTQI, so I just wanted to strike a thought about how you think of the abandoned children. How are we considering them over here?
Yeah, okay,
yeah.
perfect. So two answers. So the first part is, where in the technology stack should this happen, the verification? We've been working through the VOCO, the Verification of Children Online project. It brought together stakeholders from, as I said, social working technologists, a whole load of us, and we did 2-week heartbeat of meetings, and the meetings went on for like a full day with us post-its and everything. So we ran some technical trials. We thought, should this happen at the ISP level, the portal? So we did some technical trials with BT, which is the largest ISP and telco operator in the UK. And we tested running solutions at the ISP portal level. So if you log into your ISP, you have me and my family. So at that level, you can add your child's details, have those verified, or you can do it on your mobile device in your native. That is not a mobile device, but just pretend in the native app, right? So we're trying to create a change, a culture change, where in 3 to 5 years' time, I think we'll look back and we'll go, we used to let kids go anywhere? What were we thinking? And it'll change such that when you get your phone, you will go through the Me and My Family feature on your native mobile app. You will be verified. So then you could be in a meeting like this, and probably at 4 o'clock after the kids leave school, you get bing, an in-app notification. They want to access Lego. You've already been verified. You can say yes or no. You get a consent receipt. Lego gets to know a verified parent has said, yes, this kid is under 12 years of age. So it'll become a seamless. So the UX side of this is really, really important to think through those. And also kids are going to try and find workarounds. So it's incumbent upon us to think about those scenarios, and also to how to incentivize them to not want to get run that. And we conducted a huge amount of research as part of the VOCO with young people, and their overwhelming response was like, we just want to talk to our friends. We don't want to be getting nude pictures and stuff and be asked for stuff. So children are behind that. The second part of your question is, this could also happen at the App Store level, at Google, Apple, and we're talking to Microsoft and stuff. So it's thinking about the existing family safety tools, how you could enhance those, and then deal with the issues of shared devices. So there's a different kind of login and stuff. Mom goes, oh, here I'm changing. This is now a kid phone. You can, watch the appropriate videos. So those are really smart. Those are really good questions, and that's part of what this standard and all of the people involved are trying to unpack those difficult kind of scenarios. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.